across America. This is The Last Word. I'm Greg Jackson. Now, tonight we have an opportunity to bring you a very unusual story, a fascinating eyewitness account of what really happened inside New York's legendary Sing Sing prison. There it is. Inmates there held 17 correction officers hostage for over 2 days. During the siege, there was a virtual news blackout. Reporters and television crews were kept outside the prison, except for these men who were actually inside the cell block, the only reporters, the only outsiders, really, to be there as the drama was unfolding. They are ABC correspondent Bob Berkowitz, his cameraman, Bob Wells, and sound man Jim Sicile, all part of an ABC television crew. They brought with them some of the remarkable footage they shot inside the prison as they watched and waited with the inmates and hostages. The videotape we have tonight is raw and virtually unedited, like what you're about to see, a released hostage pleading for the lives of guards and inmates. Now, I want to warn you about what you're going to see throughout the evening. The man you're to see has been in a real crisis, and his language reflects it. There are a lot of four-letter words. We hope it won't offend you, but these were his words. This is what happened. Watch.
I went out there, I was asking for Cuomo. I'm telling you, I was scared. But I was more scared. There were officers over there bugging out. I didn't bug out, I was cool, but I ended up, I want that camera to be for real. I go back to the block. I go back and die. How can you prove to me that camera is working? How can you prove to me that camera is working? Could I go back to the block and die? Where? Mother, brother, I'm doing as best I can. You got to save those inmates, because if you don't, they're gonna die. And they know, and they were begging me, we don't want to kill the officers. They crying to me, we don't want to do to officers, but they know they're gonna get killed, so we're gonna take the officers. Brother, they had me, they could have cut me up the first 15 minutes. They fed me and closed me and gave me medication. This mother brother gave me penicillin. He kept me alive for that. Some of the mother brother and lab brothers. The administration do.
Incidentally, this was the guy who was sitting there holding that recorder when he looked down to say, how do I know that camera's running? I know what it was probably like, so let's go on. What really happened at Sing Sing, what might have happened and things go wrong. You can ask all of these gentlemen your question. Ladies, or on other broadcasts during the day, you saw a report on a crisis that ended yesterday at the prison simply known as Sing Sing. It's a prison just up the Hudson River from New York City. Inmates there held 17 correction officers hostage for some 50 hours. Now, whatever reports you watched, they were likely to have been highly condensed summaries of the event. But tonight, on The Last Word, we're going to take that dramatic siege apart, sort of piece by piece, as it were, with the help of the three men who are actually inside the cell block at Sing Sing. They were all, I guess, unexpectedly part of the drama. Let me introduce them again. Bob Berkowitz, an ABC correspondent. His cameraman, Bob Wells. The sound man, the man who carries the equipment, Jim Sicile. Let's begin with the most obvious question. Why were you the only reporters inside that prison?
Well, all the reporters, all the TV reporters were asked to put their names down on a list. We did that. And about 15 minutes later, the public relations man for the prison came and said, I want Bob Berkowitz and his ABC crew to come with me. And I didn't know why they picked me or they picked us. We went in there, and it turns out that that somebody on Governor Cuomo's staff is a fellow I worked with years ago. He knew me, he trusted me, he sold us to the prisoners, and it was fine.
I don't know if you were thinking at the time that was quite a reward. Wells, you're the cameraman. What were your feelings going into that prison, and what did you see?
I think it happened so fast, it was sort of a shock, a surprise, and we reacted as we would with any news story, and simply grabbed up our equipment and proceeded into the building.
But your heart pounding?
Not then.
When?
But after I had secured my equipment inside and we started to pass through the institution, I began to reflect on why am I here?
And what was the first pictures? You had to pass through, well, they don't call them SWAT, they call them a CERT team?
CERT team, Correctional Emergency Reaction.
Your camera was rolling now as you're walking. Let's take a look at this. This is virtually the first thing you saw in there. These guys are all heavily armed. Is that right?
Well,
no, they're not armed at all.
They have just
clubs.
Baton.
Yeah.
Right? And
nobody's allowed to have a gun, Greg, inside a prison.
They have like tie wraps, like for handcuffing.
No, but that gave you the sense those men were there for real. Yeah. Something went wrong. How many of them were there?
Hundreds. They're big. They are big and tough. They're mean-looking guys. And,
did the prisoners ever see these guys?
No.
They're always held in the background.
No, they knew they were there, though. They absolutely knew they were there.
And you knew they were there?
Oh, absolutely.
Were you scared?
No, the only time I was really scared was when that guy came. I wanted to know if the recorder was running. what happened was he didn't see the light on top of the camera. So he wanted me to prove to him that the thing was running. So what I did was I just uncovered the machine and showed him the tape moving.
And we should make
But
clear.
I thought that he was going to, like, you saw him turn around and show me it's real. And I thought either A, I was going to get hit, or the camera was going to get knocked over.
We should make clear that was a correction officer. That wasn't an inmate. Now,
right.
so we've gotten through the unarmed but burly, club-laden men, and we're now suddenly in a mess hall, as I understand it.
Yeah.
We have that scene. Let's see how it was. Now, this is the cameraman's obviously way in the back. Can you explain?
That's B block. That's B block's mess hall.
Right.
And I'm sitting on the right-hand side. You can't
With
really
the
see me.
stripes.
Yeah. No, in front of the fellow with the stripes on there.
Yes.
Now, the hostages, rather the inmates and the state's negotiators are in the upper left-hand corner of the screen.
Way in the back.
They're sitting around a dining table there, and they're just sitting there talking. Now, Greg, throughout this whole thing...
Wait a minute. Who are the men in blue?
They're also part of the state's negotiating team. They say COCS, and
Right.
it's the DOCS, the Department of Correctional Services, on their
Okay.
jackets. Now, throughout this thing there, most of the time they would sit around a table there and have a very business-like conversation. Occasionally, you'd hear these flares of shouting and arms waving. But most of the time it was business-like. They'd break up in caucus occasionally in different groups. But it was fairly calm and fairly quiet. You see some order there, Greg?
Yes.
When the state's negotiators first walked in that room, the prisoners took hoses and just hosed them down.
So these guys here in blue.
Yeah, exactly. And so the place was just absolutely drenched.
Just to kind of show them who's boss at this
Yeah,
moment?
it was a power struggle. It was a power thing.
Now, what restrictions were on you, Bob, as the cameraman there? I see only backs.
Well, originally when we arrived, they positioned us exactly where our
Oh, here
point
they
of
are,
view-
erupting, getting
Now,
up all of a sudden.
right
You had no
here-
idea.
They were angry.
Right
They were
here,
angry.
they are being called by other inmates inside because they are envious and jealous of the fact that these gentlemen are receiving all the publicity. So what they want is to work out a solution so that perhaps a few of the other men inside can also receive some of the publicity that the 4 or 5 that are representing them have.
Okay, now, we should also make it clear, inside that prison you had at least 3 or 4 groups. You had a white group, you had Muslims, you had the Hispanics.
Puerto Ricans, yeah.
And as I understand it, the hostages were divided up amongst them.
Yeah, you know, the hostages kept changing their membership on the committee, and that was one of the problems. You didn't know who to negotiate with.
Okay, now, we're going to come back with some more. We've kind of set the scene. You walked through that group. We've seen where all the negotiations went on. Until
Virtually,
the end.
yeah.
We're going to come back and look at some more as the days wore on. Stay with us.
And we'll also be taking your questions about Sing Sing at 1-800-MIDNIGHT. Remember, dial the 1-800 prefix or your calls will not reach the last word.
These are the guys who were actually in cell block B. They were representing ABC News, and you had to give the footage that you shot.
Absolutely, we were full
pool.
correspondents.
Okay, now let's go on with this. You have been in there. Are you eating?
Unfortunately,
Yes.
yes. Yes, and unfortunately, it was just, the food was just awful, Greg. I mean, it was, I wasn't in the Army, but I've got to believe it was worse than Army food.
The best food we had was at lunchtime. It was some kind of deep-fried fish with string beans, and that was the best.
Did it ever occur to you as you were sitting in there, what would it be like if I was an inmate?
That's what I fantasized about constantly, because it was, Greg, I got to tell you, a lot of it was boring. We'd sit there for hours and hours and hours, and nothing would happen. We'd try to sleep. We were given a table to sleep on, no sheets, no blankets, no anything, and you know, I sort of crumpled my coat up to put my head on it to try to sleep, and I couldn't. So I fantasized. Let's say I had to spend 30 years in this joint. What would it be like?
You'd probably be in the rebellion. Now listen,
Probably.
I think what we all realize, this is not the United Nations, and there's no handy place to carry on these negotiations. For example, some of your footage, Bob Wells, let's look at it now. This is a heavy-duty negotiation, talking to each other between the bars. What am I looking at?
Well, what we have here are a few of the correction officers talking with the inmates at the gate, and there is BG of conversation on the phone, which simultaneously 2 events were occurring, which I felt was strategy that
Let me
the
ask you,
inmates
let me
had.
stop you there. Why are the bars, are they afraid to...
Well, What this is the entranceway from the block into the mess hall.
Oh, okay.
We're in the mess hall.
Beyond this area, this is what they refer to as the bridge.
Yes.
And beyond the bridge would be another gateway which would lead into the block.
But as time wore down now, as I looked at your footage, the prisoners started coming through those gates and wandering around.
Yeah, it was a breakthrough when the prisoners and the administration negotiators met face to face. Through much of the initial part of the crisis, they would just meet through the bars.
The men really didn't know how to talk to each other in the beginning, did they? I mean, nobody quite knew what was going to happen. Everyone thinks of Attica.
That was confusion. I don't think they thought of Attica.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think so. You covered Attica, and I wanted to talk to you about the differences between this and Attica. But I just didn't get the sense that it was that violent or there was that crucial a moment.
It really wasn't that well planned of an uprising.
No, it was
really.
just completely spontaneous.
Okay, now you as the reporter, being the only person there again, at some point, you couldn't shoot the faces of the inmates for a long time. You were reduced to shooting your reporter. There you are, Robert, in the mess hall. What was your you look almost, excuse me really, but I mean you look kind of silly just standing there. What was your feeling as being the reporter in the place?
Well, I got to tell you that. I felt very uncomfortable about it. You know, you're a reporter, I'm a reporter. We try to be objective. We try to be a little distant between us and our subjects. We want to maintain a certain objectivity. And yet, here I was. Like it or not, I was part of this whole thing. I was being used by both sides. I was a pawn. The only thing
Wait, don't rush on. What do you mean you were being used?
Look,
be specific.
It was clear why I was there. The prisoners wanted me there, and they wanted Bob, and they wanted Jim there, to witness this whole thing and to make sure the world knew that they weren't maltreating their hostages when their hostages came out.
Okay.
Okay, fine. The other side, the administration side, they wanted us there. So we could be a chip, a bargaining chip. Okay, we gave you the ABC guys here. Now what are you going to give us in return? So we were a chip on both sides. One of them said to me, frankly, look, you're a premium pal, and we were kicked out of the room at one point. Not because we had done anything wrong, but because, according to the administration, the prisoners were not negotiating in good faith.
They didn't earn
so
the
we're going to take away your little gift, and we're going to take away, and we were just put in the next room.
Okay, hold on now. We've got some more. We've got some fascinating footage just about to come up. Stay with us. It's worth it.
And if you have any questions about Sing Sing, please call us at 1-800-MIDNIGHT. That's MIDNITE in the Eastern and Central time zones.
You're about to see a very emotional scene involving people who were involved in a very real, raw crisis, and they were in that for a long time, facing possible death. I say all this because their language is raw. It reflects their anger, their emotion, their frustration. There are four-letter words. We hope you're not offended by them. But what follows is what you would have heard and what you would have seen had you been inside of Sing Sing. To give a true sense, the language now is unedited. I repeat, this is the first time the hostages have come out, the guards.
This fucking badge don't mean shit to me, man, because this job I don't need. I don't need. What's the deal? What's the deal with the shit right now? You identified me. These guys aren't gonna put up with any more shit, right? They're not gonna put up with any more shit. You identified me, man. I tried in there. I tried to keep everybody else calm, and I've been taking the shit, just trying to keep everybody else down. Got guys back there just about passed out, all right? They're not gonna make it, man, if you don't do that. They gotta get, the inmates cleaned up the whole block today. They cleaned up the whole place, man. All they wanted you to do is sign the paper. We was walking out. We was all ready to walk out. They had the place cleaned. Twice they cleaned up that place, man. You know, they thought you people was gonna keep your word. Twice, man. They cleaned up the whole goddamn place because they thought you was gonna keep your word. I want the Muslim brothers and the Latin brothers kept us alive. They wanted to kill us, man. And look, and I'm cool. I was there, they wanted to kill us. And they kept us alive and they said, you a hoe. I went and I tried to find out what you doing. I'm trying to express myself. Look, I ain't scared to die, but I'm thinking about everybody in there. Inmates or officers, they all bleed. You got to help them. Please help them. Either do your move now or they all gonna die. That's what I'm gonna say.
Repeat, those were the first correctional officers released. They were led away and more followed. Less emotional, seemingly almost stunned.
A few of the moments seemed nonplussed, Greg, like they were just getting off a shift. This man looked a little emotionally beaten. But some of them, I said, how are you doing? They said, fine, okay.
You know what's so striking? I have to remind everyone, I suppose, those were the correctional officers coming out. In that brief period, they seemed to be more pleading for their captors than the guys who were trying to help them.
Well, the prison psychologist told us that they were suffering from something called the Stockholm Syndrome. That is where the victim starts identifying with his kidnapper and not those who are trying to save their lives.
Bob, what was that guy yelling about? You identified me.
You identified me. I think that who he was referring to or who he wanted to communicate with was the Muslim brother, as he had said live on videotape when we were rolling the tape. This was so that he established with him that he had fulfilled, I believe, his commitment that he would, in fact, express the sentiments of the inmates that were held captive.
So wait a minute. So much for what the facts were. What were your feelings? I mean, suddenly these guys came out. What were you thinking?
Well, I personally, I had two things that I was conscious of. One was doing the job and getting the job done. The other was trying to suppress my emotional feelings about it.
Which were?
I was nervous. I was upset. Personally, it goes with the job. It's part of the business, but it's not something that I really look forward to.
Jim?
And on the other hand, you're so tired at this point. I mean, we've been up, God, almost 45, 50 hours, you know, and it doesn't really hit you what's going on until after the fact, you know.
Okay, let's answer some questions. I guess all of us have to say we were a little startled. That isn't what we thought the guards, the correction officers would come out overjoyed, and they came out. Let's see if anybody else had this reaction. You have the last word. Go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to know, any time where your life's threatened?
No.
I didn't feel, you said you felt apprehensive at some time. I didn't feel that way. Jim, I don't know how you
The only
feel.
time I thought that something was going to happen was at one point I was sitting in the middle of this mess hall, and I was talking to this officer. Next thing I know, there was a lot of noise coming from the cell block, excuse me, and there were officers along both walls, and they looked at each other, and the officer escorted me to the back. At that point, I thought maybe something was going to happen. They were going to, there'd be a little commotion, you know.
I was saying my brother Neil is a psychologist tonight, and he told me I was crazy for not feeling scared.
Well, he's probably right. Hold on. You have the last word. Go ahead.
Yes. Has experience in the prison changed the reporter's life in any way?
Changed your life in any way?
I don't think so. I think it's an experience I'll never forget for the rest of my life. It's a great journalistic experience, but I don't think it's going to change me.
But didn't it come through also your reports? That prison that had been a factory would have been closed 10 years ago. It is rat-infested. The men weren't getting their mail.
Well, the conditions as I saw the facility were not great. There were major problems in terms of the constructions of the wall, the bathrooms, etc., the kitchens.
They were redoing, though, the kitchen area.
But
under construction.
Okay, hold on a minute. We're going to go to more phone calls. Let me take this break, and we'll come back and pick this up. Stay with us.
And when we come back, we'll be taking more of your calls on the Sing Sing Uprising. Our number 1-800-MIDNIGHT. That's MIDNITE here on The Last Word.
We're talking with the ABC News crew that was inside Sing Sing during that uprising. Let me make sure I got something clear. Did you have any direct dealings with the inmates themselves?
Very rarely. When we first arrived there, they asked to see my news credentials. I showed them that. They were very polite, friendly to me. And every once in a while, they'd say something as we were walking by, but very little beyond that.
You were really there just as observers to make sure the deal was the deal and you would record it?
Well, yeah.
Okay. Hold on just a minute. Let's go back to the phones. And you have the last word with this crew.
Yes, I'd like to ask the reporters that did they at any time see the ridiculously adverse conditions that the prisoners had to live under?
Why do you, wait a minute, why do you ask that? There's more to this. Go on.
Yes, true, there's more to this, because the reason why I asked that, because I wanted to ask them that if, for some reason, they were called by the grand jury as to the witness stand, whose side would they be on? Would they be on the side of the prisoners, or would they back up the prison officials?
I get the feeling that were you ever involved in one of these?
Yes, I was.
As a prisoner?
Yes.
Where?
There.
Were you in Sing Sing?
There.
Well, personally, for myself, we were not there to pass judgment.
Right.
We were there as a news-gathering crew, and as a result of that, we have not really an opinion as to whether or not if they were living under conditions that were favorable or unfavorable. We, in fact, did pass through a small cell block, and I had the opportunity to visually see the size of the block and to see some of the conditions under which they do live. But that had no effect on my photojournalism as a representative of the news media.
Well, let's see, you at home, what do you think of that answer, and what are you getting at?
Actually, what I'm getting at is now, see, they're on the outside, and now they've had a chance to look at it from both sides. Okay, they've seen it from the civilian aspect, and also as close as they could possibly come to seeing it from the inmate aspect without actually being an inmate. Now, what I wanted to know was, actually, would they stand up and come forth and say that what the inmates were seeing and were conditioned?
It's not my job. I appreciate what you're saying, and I really understand where you're coming from, but that's not our job. Our job is to report the news and not to make judgments on what's good, bad, or indifferent. I understand what you're saying, though.
Okay. Thank you for calling. Hold on, let me take another call. You have the last word. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. This is Rick from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And I'd just like to ask why everybody's so worried about prisoners' rights when a lot of times they violated people's rights, and they're the ones that are in there. They threaten the guards' lives, but we're supposed to be worried about them. Why?
Well, let me react for the first moment. I'm not sure we're worried about them. We were reporting that 17 men were in real jeopardy because the prisoners grabbed them. You take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, we were reporters there, and I think it's a legitimate news story, and I have no apologies to make by the way we reported it. And you can make your own judgments about whether or not the rights are legitimate or not.
Do you feel that we are coddling or somehow espousing the cause of the prisoners?
Not you especially, but we've got to give them, you know, concessions and amnesty and all this.
They didn't get that, though. They really didn't get that much. They got a fair hearing, I suppose, but it's quite likely that there'll be some kind of criminal indictments against some of them.
Well, what would happen if I did that, though? If there would be a lot more than...
The same thing that happened to them. As I just said, sir, probably, some of them will be indicted for criminal offenses for what they did last night or the night before.
Okay. Thank you for calling. We're going to come right back and take as many phone calls as we can. Stay with us.
And we'll have more of your calls on the Sing Sing Uprising at 1-800-MIDNIGHT. Remember, dial that 1-800 prefix or your calls will not reach the last word.
During that last commercial break, I was reflecting on something Bob Berkowitz, the correspondent, said. You felt you were used by both sides. You gave the example of you being a premium that would be withdrawn. Did anything else come to mind?
Yeah, at one point, one of the state's negotiators came to me rather desperately and rather forcefully and said, Bob, you've got to guarantee me that their demands will go on the 11 o'clock news. And I said, even if I wanted to, I couldn't do it. No deal. That's not my role here. You know that. And he got very frustrated. He said, okay, and he went back and told him that. Then at one point, I think he went to Bob and Jim and asked what our live capabilities were to get out of there. Could we broadcast live from the mess hall at B Block?
They were kind of double-checking on you.
No, I don't think so. I think there's something separate between going live and having their demands on the 11 o'clock.
Okay, let's go back to the phones. You have the last word. Go ahead.
Good evening. Do you as reporters feel as though you experienced any of the Stockholm Syndrome yourself after being there for 2 days?
No, I didn't.
No.
Any what?
And the same thing that the hostages went through.
I personally felt sorry for the individuals who were involved. I felt sorry for the officials who were involved, and I also felt kind of bad for myself and my partner and our correspondent to spend 43, 45 hours under those conditions without sleep. I was glad to get out.
But emotionally, you were quite detached. You're saying you didn't in any way experience a breakdown or any of those pressures?
We were safe. I mean, I think we were pretty safe, you know. We had all these people on the other side of the door, this CERT team. There were officers inside, these correctional officers, a dozen of them. I mean,
okay.
I think we were. All
right, hold on just a minute. You have to laugh. I hope we don't sound as reporters hard-hearted, but you know, we're in these things about once a week in one sort of emotional thing or another, and it might be like a doctor in an emergency room. You have the last word. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Sheila from Charlottesville, Michigan.
Uh-huh.
I want to know if the prisoners really think that they accomplished a lot by holding the hostages.
I don't know. You'd have to ask the prisoners that question, I suppose. But I don't think they did. I think that the original demands, they would have gotten what they had asked for originally if they just...
The bottom line was that they got what they had to begin with. Like, the bottom line was the food. The guy came out and said, listen, give these 600 men food to calm them down. They're hotheads. We got to ice them, show them, give them food, and they'll calm down. And that's what they got, was the food. That's what...
Probably got some more than that.
More than that, yeah. But I mean, that was one of the issues.
Well, don't you think this did highlight, I mean, to go back to the other gentleman's question, it really did highlight the plight of the prisoners in Sing Sing. It's a very unique place because, I mean, they're supposed to be on their way to someplace else and they're suddenly stuck there for a year with nothing to do.
Sure, sure, absolutely. I mean, they accomplished something in the sense that for at least a few days, and even right now, you know, they accomplished something by our presence on your show. You're being used too, Greg.
Well, I mean, I think we ought to ask our audience at home, though, however, meeting people like you who are actually doing it, they can form their own opinion about was it worth it, why was all this media attention there, and as I say, there were lives at stake. Hold on, you have the last word, probably the last one. Go ahead.
Yes, could you tell me what could be done to prevent this from happening again?
Gee, I don't know. I'm certainly not an expert on jail reform. I couldn't say. There are any number of factors that go into something like that.
It is truly humble to have anyone on television say they don't know. You may be the first guy I've talked to in 3 years. Anyway, I want to thank all of you. It's time you all went home, had a shower and maybe a little beverage and got to bed. Jim Sicile, the sound man, the engineer, Bob Wells, the cameraman, Bob Berkowitz, the correspondent. You all have the week off. In the meantime, we'll come back. Stay with us.
And coming up, Phil Donahue looks at why women are paid smaller pensions than men as we continue The Last Word.